flashing his money, and the woman is looking at him sort of saying, boy, this guy's a wild guy. What's the truth about this?
Chips.
Well, the truth turns out to be pretty much what you'd expect. This guy is very conservative. He's hiding his money, and he's going to play very conservatively. But this man, waving his money, is going to play fairly recklessly, and he'll bluff more. It turns out that tell can be worth lots and lots of money. And if you're not watching players buy chips, you missed it. Did you know you can gain valuable information just by reaching for your chips? And the object is just to make your opponent hesitate. The professional at right is about to use this technique to make the bettor at left look back at his cards and then bet forcefully. And then, in response, the professional calls. Why? Well, it's because when you can make an opponent look back at his cards just by reaching for your chips and then bet forcefully, that's almost always a bluff. So expect this professional to win the hand. Let's see what happens. Yes, indeed. Players often buy chips in a manner directly indicative of their style of play. Flamboyant means flamboyant. Guarded means guarded. I don't know, maybe patience is a virtue in poker, but patience can also be a powerful tell that can doom your opponent. Well, maybe it's not patience itself that dooms these opponents, but they are telling us something about the way they're planning to play that we can profit from. When you see players leaning back in their chair, they're not going to get involved in a hand come hell or high water unless it's a very, very good one. And then suddenly you might see this. They start to straighten themselves up, put their hands on the table. That's because an interesting hand is coming or they're changing their attitude. The point here is that players leaning back, especially if they're folding their arms, are in a conservative mode and they aren't going to be bluffing. What I'm about to show you is not so much the tell itself, but the mistake that the woman makes. Let's see if you can spot it.
Cards, please.
Now just follow along. The woman takes a card. The man takes 3 cards. Looks at his cards. Well, and now he looks away. Well, you know what that means. We've talked about that. But the woman did something she wasn't supposed to do. What was it?
Cards, please.
You probably think I'm going to tell you that she's making a mistake by betting into this man who's looking away and not very interested. Well, you'd be right that that's the tell, but you'd be wrong about that's what I'm going to tell you. What I'm going to tell you is this woman made a terrible mistake by never even looking at her opponent, and that's what so many players do. They don't even look for the tell that could save them thousands of dollars each year. Now watch it again. Now watch. She's looking at her cards. It's like a bingo game, right? See, she didn't even look at him. And all she had to do was look over there and see that she was going to be raised, and she shouldn't bet. Draw poker is another game where you can get valuable information about what your opponent holds before the action even gets to them. In this case, the woman draws 1 card, but what's the man in the vest going to do? Well, one thing he's not going to do is rap pat. You have my word on it.
2.
See, that motion was all to confuse the lady. He was really going to draw cards all along.
Cards, please.
Whenever an opponent goes out of their way to give you information about their hand before they have to, you can bet that information is false. Sometimes there can be a tell where you least expect it, under the table. Watch this man's leg shake.
Okay, I check. I pass.
3-7.
Oh.
Lucky you didn't call.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't call.
Now this is almost the same, but can you see something that's different?
I call. What do you have, brother?
Yeah.
Well, king high.
Take it.
Send the money.
Jittering under the table is not unusual among impatient players. You can see it out of the corner of your eyes, or sometimes you can even feel the table shake.
Okay, I check.
What's important is that when you threaten to call a player and he continues to jitter, that means he probably has the hand.
Yeah, I'm glad
In this case, same shaking,
I check.
he bets, I reach for my chips to stop him, and look what happened. The jittering suddenly stopped. Then he went ahead and bet, but I knew that was a bluff. When a player is bluffing, he's under a lot of tension and tends to freeze.
King high.
Take it.
Send the money.
Now that leg action under the table was pretty neat stuff. But sometimes you can see the same kind of reaction right in front of your eyes. The man in the foreground is tapping his fingers rhythmically and then betting. Now watch, here's another version of that. But something is different. Can you see what it is and what it means? Well, in the first case, after betting, these fingers just kept right on tapping. That usually means the player is satisfied with his hand and not afraid of the call. But in the second case, as soon as I reach for my chips, the player freezes. His hand stops tapping. Then I know I can call, and I guess I'm going to win. Yes! Well, that's pretty powerful stuff, but there are a few more things you should know. One is that studious-looking players are usually not holding powerful hands. Well, what does that mean? Well, if a player is looking at you like this, looking at his cards, studying your hand over here, thinking, puzzling, that player usually has a weak hand, and you can go ahead and bet for profit. And another thing you should know is that players who deliberately, well, I use the wrong word, we'll just say in quotes, accidentally expose cards. If that card looks strong, you should figure them for a weak hand. If that card looks weak, you should figure them for a strong hand. That's because this exposure is, of course, not really accidental. They're trying to give you a clue, and they're trying to give you the wrong one. Oh, here's a really good tell. You're going to like this. When a player checks softly, tap, tap, just to you, I check, that's usually an indication that it's safe to bet. They really don't have any conviction in that check. They're not threatening you. Now, sometimes it works just the opposite. But in the long run, you're going to get a big percentage edge by assuming that unless you know differently on this particular player, that a soft check is really hoping that you don't bet. It means, I'm not going to declare war on you. Please don't bet. Soft check. On the other hand, an aggressive check, I check, is usually weak. Let's look back on some of these really powerful tells. Never forget that your opponent's chips tell you a story. In this case, what do these chips say? Well,